Welcome to Profit Boss Radio. I'm your host, Hilary Hendershott, certified financial planner and owner of every money mistake you can imagine. I now run a successful financial planning and wealth coaching firm. I'm here to share with you what I learned turning failure into financial freedom. Profit Boss Radio is all about how women like us are authoring our own lives, rewriting the rule book of money, and running incredible businesses. If you like this show, hit subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave us that 5-star review. Are you ready, Profit Boss? Let's do this. Hey, it's Hilary Hendershott. Real quick before we get to the show, I want to share how you can get my comprehensive and virtual wealth coaching course for business owners. Since I started sharing how I multiplied my wealth from more than $500,000 in debt to accumulating over 8 figures in wealth through neuroplasticity, changing my brain about money, lots of you have been reaching out to find out how you can do that too. So this podcast is loaded with lots of great financial advice from both myself and my guests, but I'll confess, Profit Boss Radio isn't intended to be a comprehensive or done-for-you system. That's why I decided to create the Money Blueprint for business owners. If you want one-on-one access to me, plus all my strategies for learning to command and manifest money, plus your own personalized plan for your business and personal finances, conveniently packaged up into a 1-year transformational course, visit hilaryhendershott.com/MBP. The link's in the show notes for all the details. Today, I am thrilled to share with you an amazing episode from the Profit Boss Radio archives. It's a conversation with career and executive coach Nina Cashman about how to alter money mindsets. It originally aired in 2016. So why am I sharing it today? Because what you're going to hear is so completely relevant to helping you achieve your financial goals. In fact, what you're going to get from today's conversation is that if you have ingrained beliefs that you sense are holding you back or facing mindset challenges in your business, you need to listen in to today's episode. Nina is going to provide insight on how you can transform your beliefs and develop your own self-supporting belief system so that you can create the life you most want to live. Nina Cashman, welcome to Profit Boss Radio.
Thanks for having me, Hilary.
Oh, I'm so excited about this conversation. And, when I found you online on Daily Worth, I thought, this woman speaks my language. And I saw a piece that you put together about changing beliefs. And I think it was specifically about changing money beliefs. And I thought, this is the thing that I've been trying to convince women and my clients and profit bosses everywhere that they can do. And so I thought I've got to get Nina on the show. And just in our pre-interview conversations, I know that you're going to have a ton of value for my audience. So I want to just get right started. And I want to ask about your history. So take us back to kind of the beginning. Tell us what your financial life was like as a child. How did you grow up into money? What were your childhood experiences and how did that go for you?
So when I grew up, I had a dad who was the greatest dad in the world. Of course, a lot of us idolize our parents. I certainly did. My dad, though, was old enough to be my grandfather, and he called himself a depression baby. He was literally born at the tail end of the Depression. He actually passed away when I was in my early 30s. I think I was right around 30 at the age of 82. And you can imagine that he came from a very old school world when it came to money and when it came to career. His philosophy was that you don't take a lot of risk, that you work hard for your money and what you earn, because he came from a world where it was taken away and lived through a great struggle, not just with his family, but that was happening in the nation. So I grew up in that type of household where if there was mold on the cheese, man, you sliced that off. You didn't throw the cheese out. If there was maybe just a little snippet of butter on the butter dish, you waited to use that before you got a new stick of butter out. So I guess it's safe to say that my childhood background really came from a perception of being very conservative with money and not taking a lot of risk when it came to money and really holding on to whatever you had because the thought was you could lose it at any point. And I would say also that I experienced with my family a lot of hardship. I witnessed my dad go from a very successful place in his career to a place where towards the end of his career, when he got older, where it was very hard for him to find work. And that impacted the way we lived, in addition to my parents getting a divorce. So there's a big hodgepodge, but I would say that the underlying theme is I grew up with this idea that earning money is somewhat of a struggle, and that the only way to really get it is to work really, really, really hard. And I suppose that was from what I witnessed most of my life.
And so what did your father do for work?
So at the time when I was born, I was actually born overseas in Belgium. He was, I think, like a senior vice president over operations for a company called Air Products. So he was a Harvard graduate, really smart guy, had been successful in business as a consultant and then in this company. And then a lot of chain of events happened, which caused him to lose that job, and everything changed in our family. So I was still very young at the time. So most of my perception when I became aware as a child was seeing more of the struggle side and hearing about the glory days and not necessarily understanding what the glory days were really like.
And so how did things change for you specifically in the home after your dad lost his job? What are some of the things you had to go do without, or how did they handle that?
Well, a lot happened. And at that time, that was a bit before my awareness. I hear stories, but my dad had to go out and find a job while my mom, who was German, so wasn't an American citizen even at the time, went to go live with his aunt in California. And so we didn't even have a home yet because he was looking for a job somewhere in the nation. And we ended up landing in New Jersey at the time. He did find a good job. When I remember or have awareness really of my parents' struggle is, I would say, really after their divorce. And that was, they got divorced when I was 5. So I was fairly aware then. And at that point, we had moved to Colorado, and my dad had still had some struggles with jobs. And then they got a divorce, and my mom had never worked in this country before. And so suddenly she was this European woman who had never written a check on her own, raising 3 kids and having to get a job. And the first job that she got was as a cleaning woman. And I always have heard this story because she had this big rock on her finger from the glory days. I would say a bigger than normal rock. And she was once repairing or opening up, changing maybe the bag in the vacuum, and she couldn't quite figure it out. So the owner of the house came to help her and saw this giant rock on her finger and was really confused that my mom was cleaning her house. But that's kind of the dichotomy of the world, of the two worlds. One was this world of a lot of abundance and success and wealth. And then suddenly we were thrown in this world where we had to be very, very tight. And my mom had to basically start at the bottom of the totem pole and work her way up as a non-American citizen at that point.
Wow. So that's really interesting. And actually, there's a large body of work that's been studied and written about the impacts of the Great Depression on people. It had almost PTSD kind of impacts, and it actually caused some overly conservative, or what you might call detrimental financial behavior, because people just didn't trust the system or the markets or even banks at all for too long, right? Their mistrust eventually was unjustified, although it was very justified, right after what happened. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about the impacts of that landing on you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there is a zeitgeist. I think that is Hegel, the philosopher, who writes about the zeitgeist, which means the ghost of time and how that passes between generations. And of course, that's naturally going to happen. I mean, our parents influence us.
Right.
And I would say certainly, and it's interesting even right now to talk about this as you ask these questions, because it really paints a picture for me of, no wonder. Yeah, this is where some of my previous limiting beliefs around money, and sometimes they still exist. They still show up for me.
Right.
But I just have a better awareness now, having done what I've done, coaching people for when a belief is limiting and holding you back.
And then as a parent yourself, and now being a conscious person, it's sort of incumbent upon you to choose which lessons you're going to pass on, even though it might start happening subconsciously, right? Like, what messages am I giving my kids? Even though I don't want that to be the reality, it's what I think or thought is reality. And so how's that coming out in my speaking?
Exactly.
And so what are some of the specific things? Do you remember some of the things your parents would say about money, or some of the things that were true about money? You know, I used to always hear money doesn't grow on trees. Anything,
Oh, yeah.
Any sort of superstitions like that?
Yeah, I mean, I heard that very often from my mom because I just didn't understand. It's funny, once I remember asking her, can I get a new outfit? Because I was always getting my sister's hand-me-downs. And by the time they made it to me, because she was 5 years old, sometimes they just weren't in style anymore. And so I really wanted to get some new clothes. And my mom was like, yeah, we just don't have the money right now. And my reaction was, well, just write a check. And she was like, well, there has to be money in the bank for me to write a check. And I just didn't get it. I didn't connect to that at all.
Right.
But it was often, when I was looking to have things, we didn't always have it. And I think that changed. I got to give a lot of credit to my mom. I mean, she really worked herself back up. And it's amazing, actually, that she did what she did with 3 kids and raising 3 kids. I mean, I have 2 kids now with the most supportive husband in the world, and a nanny, and great teachers and great friends who can help, and neighbors. I mean, she was raising 3 kids and working 12-hour days. So I also associated, like I said before, not only does money grow on trees, it only grows if you work your butt off, was my perspective. And that really stuck with me, and it impacted me. And sometimes it still does. Sometimes I still catch myself in it.
So then how did that belief system translate into your first working years, your early 20s or your first jobs? What do you find yourself doing, and how's money going for you?
Well, you know what's so funny? I'm a firm believer in the law of attraction, which is like energy attracts like energy. So it's no wonder that my first gigs, I found people who were workaholics as my leaders, and they were brilliant. And I, in retrospect, I'm so grateful for all the opportunities I had, because being a hard worker condenses a lot of experience or compresses it into a short amount of time. So I feel like I was able to experience a lot of big successes at an early age due to the fact that I was working for really hard workers. I mean, we got stuff done. We got stuff done in a very short period of time, which just afforded us more experiences. The thing is, though, is of course I drew in that because my mentality was that you don't just work hard, you have to really break your back almost to the point where it's unhealthy. And so I found those people and I worked for a lot of them. And I think on the one side, I'm very grateful for that. And on the other side, I had to do a lot of rewiring later in my life and understand that there's a way to be very, very productive and also be healthy and also have time for other things in your life and people in your life that you care about outside of work.
So when does this level of awareness start to come to you, or how did that happen, that you come into a realization, hey, maybe this isn't the only way to earn and live and think about money?
Well, it's funny. The first time I realized it was when I moved back from the East Coast to Colorado, which is where I'm from. And I continued working in a gig that I loved. And by the way, I love to work. There's a side of me that just loves to work.
Sure.
So,
and what are you doing for work at this point?
At that time, I was in event marketing. So I was doing business development for an event and experiential marketing agency. So it was in the world of deadlines, which is what marketing is. And it was client services as well. So we were on the agency side. So there were a lot of deadlines, a lot of demands, a lot of travel around the country, working for big name brands, consumer packaged goods primarily. And they let me, because I wanted to move back to Colorado, they let me open up a quote unquote Denver office, which was basically my studio apartment. But anyway, I was working my butt off. And as I started to make a lot of friends who were my age at the time, and here I was, I guess, early to mid 20s, I mean, people thought I was crazy. They could not understand that someone could possibly commit that much of their time to work. I mean, I was never able to go out. The middle of the week was like a school night to me because I had to wake up and work the next morning. And usually I was working till insane hours anyway. And I remember a couple of people told me, yeah, you're the hardest working person in Denver, which clearly is not true because there's a lot of hardworking people in Denver. But
not an award you want to win, though.
No, it's not an award you want to win. And also, I happen to live in a great place where having a hobby is just as important to the type of person you are as your career. That's a bit how Denver is. Oftentimes, the first question you get when someone says, "What do you do?" they don't necessarily mean, "What do you do for work?" They actually are interested in your interests.
Wow.
And I didn't have that. I didn't have that at all. So that was my first awareness is like, wow, I take things a little too seriously for someone in their early 20s. And then I would say the biggest thing that really changed the way I look at it is having kids. And that's more recent. 4 years ago, having a child and recognizing that I was not prioritizing my life in the way I would like to prioritize it was just a game changer.
So this is really interesting. And so tell me about this shift, because you seem to have so much learning and your conversation around beliefs and the impact of beliefs is very robust. So I'm unclear how we go from event planning and having a kid, which I get the reprioritization, but then how do you transition to what you're doing now?
So I have, number one, been in marketing for 17 years. So I was able to, through those experiences, work with a lot of different people and work with a lot of different teams. And in that role, I really realized, number one, that I love working with people. That was actually what I loved most about what I did. I'll always be a marketer at heart. And I think there's actually a lot of parallel between making a brand or product successful and making a person successful. There are really a lot of the same 101 basics that can make that happen. And that's very translatable. But also just working with people and recognizing that when you can empower someone to be their best and they really can bring that out into the world, that's when you're leading a really powerful team. And that's so rewarding. So that's how I made the transition into coaching and then started working on my certification. So did I answer your question, Hilary? Are you looking
so?
Sir? Okay.
And you have 2 certifications. Which are they?
So I got my certification in coaching from IPEC. Mm-hmm. And then also I am certified in what's called the Energy Leadership Index. And that's an assessment from IPEC that administers it. And what it does is it measures different attitudes or levels of energy. And what's interesting about that assessment is it's not a personality assessment. It's an attitudinal assessment, which means you can shift very quickly. When you recognize that you have a certain attitude, say that you're existing in a victim mentality and you're aware of that and you're recognizing how much that suppresses your behavior, then most rational people will shift it. And that's what that assessment measures.
Oh, wow. So much to ask. And I mean, there's just so many places I want to go with that. So this is great. And this is really the meat of it. And so let me start from the beginning. Based on your experience, your training, I mean, and I can tell you bring a lot of your own research and real life experience to what you do. If you were to be presented with a client came to you and said, I'm suffering in the area of money. Like, for example, there's money coming in, but I suffer around it. I have stress and anxiety. I fight with my husband. I'm never sure that the money's going to stay around. What's your thinking? Where do you apply your frameworks and where do you start with someone like that?
Absolutely. So where I start with most clients is really digging into their belief of who they think they are. And that has a lot to do with some of the initial questions that you've asked me. You've done a great job coaching me by asking me questions about, wow, where did that come from? So you have this belief. Tell me more about how that resonated with you as a child. And for someone listening to this, what they saw or heard unfold was you helping me to acknowledge that I have a belief that might be blocking me from success, financial success in some way. And then also helping me to understand where that came from. And in doing so, you kind of created sort of a therapeutic process, which enables me to understand and have compassion for myself that, wow, no wonder I feel that way.
Right.
I have to give myself actually a bit of credit for feeling this way because I've lived through a lifetime of witnessing things that did nothing but validate that belief from a very young age.
Right.
And what I call that is an energy block. There's a few different forms of energy blocks. They show up as limiting beliefs, interpretations, assumptions, or just inner critics, something that's criticizing you, a voice in your head that criticizes you. If someone shows up with any type of block, whether it's a financial block to financial success or success in general, what we have to do first is delve into who they believe themselves to be. And once we can recognize what those thoughts are, we start to raise awareness in the same way you helped me to raise awareness as to where some of my beliefs are coming from. And when that awareness is there, you can start looking at how you're showing up. So shifts happen between who you think you are and how you're doing things. And the reason being is thoughts generate feelings. Feelings are the most powerful fuel we have. The bus is not going to move without the fuel of feelings. We act, our actions spring from the way we feel. And then when we act in a certain way, it creates the results in our life, which in turn becomes our reality. And so in order to break the paradigm of anything happening in our world, we have to really address who we think we are. And we have to start exploring our thoughts in the same way you just did with me.
Okay. So exploring your thoughts. And then is there also a modality or a thought that most people act in reaction to feelings which come chronologically after thoughts, which are made up of language? Right? So do you subscribe to the thought process or the thinking that if you can subvert that cycle, so if I can act in the absence of feelings through consciousness and admitting that it does take activation energy, right? It takes something for a human being to train him or herself to act in the absence of feelings. I mean, I tell you, I make phone calls almost every day that I don't want to make. Right. But I'm conscious about it. And I know that those phone calls are in service of a greater good, that rejection in the moment isn't the same as dying in real life. Right. But so, and I do this all the time where I start talking and I talk too long and it's hard for me to wrap it up. But have you ever prescribed that kind of coaching? Like just take action?
Absolutely. In fact, there's a quote I love by David J. Schwartz, who wrote a book called The Magic of Thinking Big. And he has a great line in there that's pretty simple, and that's that action cures fear. Here's the deal, though. By taking action, you are generating new feelings. So in that example, right? You're
creating a new loop.
Exactly. You're creating a new loop. That's exactly it. So the thing is, though, we're feeling, even if we think we're not feeling, even if we're feeling numb is still a feeling. And so sometimes you're absolutely right. Sometimes the best prescription is, look, I know you don't necessarily want to. I know you think that this is a big, scary monster because the more you procrastinate, the more that's what it becomes. But if you just go look at it, you'll see that it's not nearly as scary as you thought. And sometimes, truly, all it does take is action. And that action is going to start generating new feelings well beyond the fear that's holding you back.
Okay, I love that. So there's maybe a two-pronged approach. It's like the therapeutic context that you started with, which is let's introspect, let's explore the history of those strongly held beliefs. And for some people, those strongly held beliefs can naturally start unwinding simply in the process of discovering where they came from.
Yep. I just do think, though, what I've noticed with my clients, it's very hard to stimulate the actual behavior of action if they're not really seeing how their current situation is holding them back. If they're not aware of that, you as a coach would be less inclined to get their buy-in to actually act.
Well,
so they
certainly. I mean,
yeah, they might say, yeah, I'll do it. And then here you are a week later checking in, doing an accountability check, and it still hasn't gotten done. Why? Because maybe they're not fully aware of how much those feelings, those initial feelings, are dragging them down.
Well, I assume someone who's going to take the time to listen to a show like this has an awareness or at least a desire to come to the table and consider taking new actions or exploring old, strongly held beliefs. I mean, it's just like, about marketing and sales. I mean, you want to be in the business of selling a product that people already want to buy. You don't want to be in the business of selling a product you have to convince people that they need and then convince them to buy it from you. Right? So I'm with you on that. Absolutely. And then when you and I were talking before we started recording, we were talking about what it takes to shift beliefs. And you said some people have you used the phrase learning dexterity when it comes to recognizing old limiting beliefs. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on what kind of people are better at recognizing limiting beliefs and letting go of them. I mean, I started sort of categorizing people, and I have this idea that there are some people who are open to the power of suggestion and some people who aren't. Like when you see a hypnotist hypnotize people from the audience, I don't know if that's real. Okay. But, 1 in 10 people will take the power of suggestion, will actually be hypnotized and start making a fool of themselves on the stage. Do you think it's the same people? And is that learned? Or is that nature or nurture? What do you think about that?
That's funny. I've always wondered too if that's real or if someone's been planted in the audience. So what I've noticed is I think it's a little different because usually, like you said, when people are attracted to a show like this or have taken the initial steps to call a coach or to call a financial expert to help them, they in turn, they've reached out for help. So they've already exposed some level of openness to receiving help. And that is a big step, actually. That deserves a lot of applaud because sometimes that takes a lot of courage to admit that you actually need help because you're being vulnerable at that point. So then after that happens, I really think that what you need to be is just committed to doing the work. It's one thing to sit here and have an awesome conversation and philosophize about concepts that are very logical and easy to grasp. And it's a whole other thing to actually do the work between sessions. And I say this even for myself, man. I mean, I can't tell you how much I often learn from my clients and how sometimes I catch myself falling off the wagon of doing the work because doing the work is hard. Doing the work means that you sometimes have to challenge old beliefs that have been with you forever and have organized your entire life. But when you're committed to doing the work, you really start to see shifts and changes. And in doing the work, you have to be really open to expressing your vulnerability because sometimes when you try out new things, it's nerve-wracking or it's a little shaky at first when you start out. And you have to kind of be open to putting yourself through the start of a process. And then I also think you just have to be really open and have a flexible mind to challenge some of your old assumptions and be open to the idea that there are multiple ways of looking at things and your way is not the only way.
Mm-hmm. And I talked about that specifically. I talk about that when I speak publicly. It's like, once you can unseat certainty in your mind, I think that's a powerful moment is when a human being admits this thing I've always lived like is true might not be true.
Absolutely.
It's a very powerful moment. And I think in my industry, such data heads are attracted to financial services. So, we're known as bean counters or calculator wielders. And so we come at the problem or the topic or the client with this, well, do X, Y, and Z kind of prescription coaching. And for the people who are already on that side of the chasm, fine and good, all well and good. right?
Right.
But then there's this whole body of people who are left on the other side of the chasm because they're hampered by limiting beliefs. And that leaves them with a perspective that doesn't make those actions reasonable. They don't call to them given that perspective. And yet they, in my opinion, desperately want, they say financial success or healing or peace of mind or freedom. I mean, if you look out in the world, I would say most of humanity has some kind of struggle in the area of money, no matter if they have a little or a lot. So I just think it's about time that these coaches with conversations like the ones we're having now get integrated into the process for many clients.
I love that, actually, because really so much of the outward tried and true, to your point, is only going to be absorbed when people have dug into a much deeper layer of awareness. If they are so blocked by a belief as to whether or not they can be financially successful, it doesn't matter how many 101 basics for success you give them or tools or templates. It's not going to sink in until they've allowed themselves to be open to a new reality.
Right. And I'll share with you just a brief example from my client work, and then I'll ask you to talk about the specific exercises you have people do. I had a client one time who, and this just give you an example of the kind of thought processes that get created that physically block money from coming into our lives. She was a business owner, and she really experienced being rich and successful when the checks would come in, literally. So checks would come in the mail, and she would put them on her desk, and she would leave them there. And she would not deposit them because when she put them in the bank physically, she experienced her money leaving her, even though that's the exact opposite of what was happening. Right. And it was completely subconscious. She discovered it, had an aha moment in the middle of one of the programs we were doing. And it was like amazing because literally a physical block to the flow of money. You know, these checks would sit on her desk, and her emotional experience is the opposite of reality, but unquestioned until she was willing and able to look at it from a different perspective.
Wow.
And a lot of my clients find similar, I call it a neuroses. I mean, no value judgment meant. We all have them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's a little bit of a neuroses. So what are some of the exercises that you mentioned? So intellectualizing about it is one thing, but is the client willing to do the work in between sessions? Give me an example of some of the work you have people do.
Well, putting really into practice the actual theories that we talk about. So say in the case that you just brought up, what I would describe that as is your client having control issues with money. So instead of allowing the flow and the cycle of money to be shared by all, so the transaction can pass into multiple hands, and having more of a connected energy around money or a thought process of abundance, that there is a cycle to it, she was more in this place of control. So we would expose that 90% of everything is just becoming aware in the same way she was, which was, wow, I'm doing this. So sometimes the exercise can be as simple as, okay, so when are you going to deposit those checks? And we mark that down. I'm going to deposit them on this day of the week. All right. How can I hold you accountable? Can you shoot me an email on that day? Absolutely, I can.
Oh, so you get real practical. That's good.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like, look, this is not rocket science. Living and breathing as a human being is not rocket science. And that's all we're doing. And the funny thing is, so much of the work I do is just about living and breathing as a human being. And it's so funny how we get disconnected from just the practical steps. To your point earlier, man, action cures fear. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
We don't have to go a lot deeper. Just go to the bank, cash those checks, tell me how you feel. How did that feel? And then we get back into feelings. In my work, that there's a lot around that, just because that's where a lot of the energy is coming from.
Hilary here with a quick timeout to tell you how we can work together to improve and even make your financial life 100% organized and hassle-free. As a listener, you probably know my story. I made every money mistake in the book until I finally figured out the power of learning how to change my brain, including my beliefs about money. This allowed me to multiply my wealth to over 8 figures. And since then, I've created a done-for-you comprehensive course to teach other business owners exactly how I did it. I've also been a wealth and financial financial advisor to women and couples for more than 20 years now. If you think we may be a great fit to work together, go to hilaryhendershott.com and just start a conversation. We provide fee-only fiduciary advice to our clients, which means our clients never, ever pay commissions, and we do only what's in your best interest, just like it's supposed to be for all financial advisors. If you want to see how my team and I measure up as financial advisors, check out our Yelp reviews at hilaryhendershott.com/Yelp. All right, let's get back to the show.
So you mentioned, and you wrote to me about the 7 stages, your financial 7 stages. So I'm used to the 7 stages of financial maturity. This is a famous book in my industry, and you had a different 7 stages, although they parallel, and you just brought them up. So would you share about those?
Absolutely. So like I said earlier, was trained by IPEC. That's where I got my coaching certification. And with that, we have this assessment called the Energy Leadership Index. And what that does is it measures the 7 levels of energy. And those do translate into our energy towards money. And starting at the bottom, a level 1 energy, which is typically a victim mentality, which, by the way, we all fluctuate through these levels all the time. We're human beings. This is not about the 7 stages of enlightenment and how can I live at level 7 all the time. This is about join the club. We're all human. We all go there to these different levels.
Sure. I know some days I feel more enlightened than others.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And then something could quickly throw you off. And that's part of the process of life. So again, this is about what the assessment helps you measure is just awareness around it. Because when you're empowered with awareness of how you're treating things, it gives you more power to make a conscious choice for yourself because you're aware. So again, level 1 energy around money is the belief in scarcity. And you're kind of in an I'm losing mentality at level 1. It's victim energy at its core. And then a step up, level 2, the energy is greed. And greed comes from this mentality of I win, you lose. And let's face it, we've all experienced in our lives working with someone who's operating from level 2 energy, and they're not fun to work with. In fact, you either feel like a victim when you're working with it, or they make you angry. They put you in level 2 energy, which is anger.
So is that like in corporate America, they would say, oh, there's always someone who wins every meeting. And I never understood it, but I saw it happening. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And level 2, by the way, levels 2 and 3 actually run rampant in corporate America. And there's a lot of organizations who are understanding that there are different levels of energy where you can achieve even more success, quite frankly, where everyone can actually gain a piece of the pot versus just making sure that someone else loses. That's, to me, a somewhat old school mentality in terms of how people can be led.
Right.
So transcending beyond greed is level 3, and that's the stage of control. That would correlate pretty well with the example that you had of the woman who couldn't cash her checks. She didn't want to
Treasuring the checks on the desk.
Exactly. She was controlling it. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is a lot of assumption and historical thoughts around money that made her really believe that you got to control your money. And so she's probably very validated in that action until she's open to a new reality with it. Then the next level up is charity. And charity, the mentality is you win. And that's level 4. And charity there's a beautiful side to that. And it's a great place, I think, especially for successful people to be open to allow money to flow. It's not the best place to run a business. If you're constantly giving your services away at a really low discounted value, you're not necessarily doing yourself much justice in terms of financial success.
Well, that doesn't make you sustainable, really.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
So all of these levels have their pluses and minuses. Level 4 is not the greatest place in business. Level 5 is a great place to operate from a business. And you can tell sort of the difference between, say, level 5, which is opportunity, versus level 2, which is greed. Because in the realm of opportunities, all participants win. And there's a caveat to that, which is there's a level of assertion you take at level 5, which is you're so committed to this idea, look, we either all feel great about this transaction or we don't play. So at level 5, you can very assertively say no and walk away from the negotiation table because you're committed to the idea of, look, there's no reason why we all can't gain from this in some way. And in order to do that, that actually requires a certain level of creativity because it's very easy to understand what you want and just stay in your own head. It's also very easy to cave and just say, all right, whatever, what do you want? I'll just give you my shirt. Let's make the deal. Let's sign.
This is great. I think I did this just yesterday.
Did you?
It's really interesting to hear you narrate it. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So level 6 and level 7, they get a little bit more lofty when it comes to business. Definitely worth noting sometimes personally. And I would say even maybe relevant for the example you used before for the person who had the control energy around money. Level 6, the mentality is that money is really shared by all and there's abundance and we all can connect to it. It's almost like if you imagine just sort of a sea of money, it's like, why are you not casting your net in that sea? Because it's flowing all around us. And why do you think you're separate from that connection? That's really a level 6 energy. At level 7, which this is very hard for me to operate for very long, is money is just paper. It's just an illusion. And that can be a tough one to grasp.
Well, I intellectually know that that's true. I can't actually say that I operate that way, though.
Yeah, that's a little bit tougher to put into practice. So if I asked a client, let's just start burning your money, I don't think most of us would be interested in doing that.
Right.
But the thing is there is some merit sometimes to that, which is like, look, at the end of the day, sometimes we allow, I've heard of people taking their lives because of financial distress. And when you're in those moments, I think that's where level 7 actually can come in sort of handy. It's like, wow, are you really going to allow this paper to cause you to cease to exist even? So there are times where level 7 is very functional. And I would say it's probably in more extreme circumstances.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. And I'll put at least the 7 levels in the show notes. And if you have a resource or a quick read or a PDF or a report that you want to include for people as a resource, maybe we could do that too in case they want to go deeper with this framework. And so with just a few minutes, not just a few, but we're sort of getting to the end of our time together, I would love to hear a couple stories from your work with clients or from just stories about, in reality, how does it look when someone takes on their money beliefs and produces a shift that leads to a new reality?
Great. So I have a couple of good stories. One was a shift from the belief in scarcity of money and stabilizing into the realm of control. And here's the thing with these different energy levels, it's hard to shift in one full sweep more than 2 levels. So if you're working with someone or if you yourself are operating from a place of scarcity, you're not necessarily just going to jump to, hey guys, let's form a win-win. Because you don't even necessarily have the perspective to be able to do that from a place of scarcity. So I worked with one client who really did operate from a place of scarcity with finances. And because of that, she was severely in debt. And what we finally had to do was really open her eyes to a place of control, at minimum, to a place of responsibility to start with. And in order to do that, again, it was all about raising awareness first for, wow, yeah, I'm here. I'm kind of in this I'm losing mentality. And because of that, I continue to draw in situations of debt. I continue to accumulate debt because I'm telling myself I'm losing when it comes to money. And so again, making her aware of that was enough to start making the shift, because when she recognized how much that was limiting her finances, she was convinced enough to make a shift. So what we started to do is really get real with what was actually going on. And as simple as it sounds, back to action cures fear, one of her action items was, look, I worked with her on building a line item spreadsheet of all of her various expenses, business and household. And I asked her to fill it out for the month. And really, so we could take a glimpse at her monthly expenses. And it was very, very fearful for her because she actually had to shine a light on what she knew deep down was not working.
Yeah,
and
that's
it was
where most
amazing.
people stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. She did it.
Yeah.
She did it. And what happened is we together in a very comforting environment and a safe environment, we held space for that. And we looked at it. And once we looked at it and recognized the obvious of what was off, she had certain expenses that were just really, I would say, extreme nice to haves. And we need a few nice to haves in our lives, but these were insane.
Oh, your choices about nice to haves need to be based on what's coming in. So you should have all the nice to haves that you can afford.
Right, exactly. And here's the deal. There was, so having 2 horses when you can barely buy groceries, she wasn't at a stage at that point where she was ready for that.
Right.
And that doesn't mean she won't be. She absolutely will be. She just has to stabilize first and recognize kind of where she was.
That's really interesting. I've seen the same thing with people who have horses many times.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think horses, boats, those doodads that just tend to suck a lot of money, but they're fun hobbies for sure. But either way, so we had to stabilize in kind of gaining a sense of control because it was really out of control. And then it was just a matter of tapping into inner wisdom, asking her questions that she easily could answer for herself. She didn't need my advice at all. It was like, wow, when you look at this, what bubbles up for you? What do you see here? And she was able to answer that on her own. And there's such a power when people can hear themselves talk because we are all so, so wise. We all have the answers inside. And sometimes it just takes opening our eyes to a greater perspective in order to start seeing the answers.
Wow.
And so yeah, that was a pretty amazing situation. And she really has continued to grow from there. So,
well, I see how you're leading people through these 7 stages. And I know exactly what you mean when you say we can only really traverse 1 or 2 at a time. But it's just really empowering and enlightening to have it crystallized in that way. So you went from scarcity consciously, intentionally to control with her. And
right.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. Do you have one more story?
I do have one more story. Another one is with someone I worked with in client services who really wanted to take their business to the next level. And what we recognized was that they were operating very much from the charity mindset. And in doing so, again, I'm a big believer in this idea of energy attracts like energy. If you're someone who's constantly giving, constantly giving, it's no wonder that you're going to attract a lot of people who want to take. So it was very, very enlightening to work with this person and expose that a lot of the clients that they were drawing in to their business did operate from scarcity or greed. And why? They were very attracted to nickel and diming, and they found a perfect person to work with in that sense. So when that person was, again, able to develop some awareness that, you know what, charity is very useful in the world, and it's a very caring place to operate from. And there are times where it's amazing to only care about the other person. I have a husband who is so great in that sense that he cares so much about his kids and about me and gives in a lot of respects. In business, level 5 tends to work better because the thing that's great about level 5 is you're not only taking care of the other person, you're also making sure your wants and needs are met. And it's not really a compromise either. It's a, no, let's both feel awesome about this. This isn't how can we compromise and water down the idea and both walk away feeling like, I guess.
Right.
This is about, no, let's sit at the table and make sure that I'm delivering exactly what you need. And because I'm going to deliver exactly what you need and the way you want it and put so much value in that, you're going to pay me. You're going to pay me what that is worth. And that's a win-win because we're both taken care of. And you attract a whole new level of clientele when you're operating from that. Because what starts to happen is you begin to say no to the clients who are operating from greed or scarcity.
Right.
Because it's just a non-negotiable for you at this point.
I think we could do a whole seminar on level 5 for women. because we're the caretakers. And I mean, for so many women I meet, money flows into their hands and then right back out to their family, loved ones, children, family members, all in an act of charity. But what you're talking about just brings so much distinction. And it's like, I think most women operate from, well, either I have it or they have it. And a natural giving mindset is, well, of course I want them to have it. But what you're saying is that's actually a construct. It's actually made up. And there's no reason that everyone can't benefit, be joyful, be grateful, and be glad that they participated.
Right. It's a less of an us versus them, and it's more of a we.
Yeah. I love it. Okay, that's fantastic. And, I could talk to you all day, but I'm going to wrap it up so that we can keep people within a normal commute time for our show lengths. And I know you have something that you want to share with my audience. Would you talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah. So anyone who is interested in learning more about the Energy Leadership Index or learning more about how coaching can really help shift outcomes in your financial life or with your perceptions of success, feel free to get in touch with me. My website is paveyourway.com, and I'm always happy to do discovery sessions to learn more about people's coaching needs to determine if we'd make a good fit, if we can build a win-win, essentially.
Great. Do you have an online scheduling calendar, or do they email you a request for a consultation?
Yeah, I do have an online scheduling link that I give to people after they initially reach out. So there's a way through my website to get in touch with me on the contact tab.
Okay.
So that's probably the best place to start at paveyourway.com.
Okay. So you can either go to paveyourway.com, or again, we'll include a link in the show notes. And Nina, I just want to thank you for being here. It's been a great conversation. Thanks so much for sharing with the Profit Boss audience.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
As we wrap things up here for today, I need to review with you the things I have to disclose as a fiduciary financial advisor offering wealth management services through my firm, Hendershott Wealth Management, LLC. You should know that the opinions I express on Profit Boss Radio are my own, and they can change. The content I provide in the show is for general education. It's not intended as specific investment advice, nor do I recommend any specific financial products. Unlike how I roll at home with my husband, I can't guarantee that my statements, opinions, or forecasts are always 100% right. Of course, I wish I could peek into that proverbial crystal ball, but so far, I haven't found it. Past performance is not indicative of future results. I talk a lot about indexes, and I want you to know you can't actually buy an index because, of course, when you take a list of companies and create a product that allows people to invest in those companies, there are fees and expenses involved that reduce returns. Remember, all investing involves risk, which, as you know, means you could lose your money. And I have to tell you that there is no guarantee that any investment plan or strategy will be successful. And that should keep my lawyers happy. Have a great day.